So I come from Romania. I started to work as a tester somewhere in 2004. And in the past 8 years, I worked as quality manager at Capgemini. I say worked because since January, I took a leave of absence. I have my first born, my first child, so I'm on parental leave for like 2 years or so. So now I'm kind of free. You can find more things about the stuff that I do on brain4it.com. For the beginning, I would like to start with a small story, because I like stories, and we'll have to go back in time a little bit. Somewhere not far away from here, in St. Petersburg, to meet this guy. I think you know him, right? And you know him especially because of the table of elements. But what he actually managed to do was to impose order on the unruly world of elements. What is less known is that the first version looked a little bit like this. And also what is less known is that he had this epiphany while he was sleeping. So he had a dream about how the elements fit in, and when he woke up, he started to draw it. You'll see what it has to do with the presentation later on. When it all started for me, so in 2001, I was responsible for a CMMI Level 2 appraisal. If you don't know about CMMI, you should look it up. It's one of the, let's say, biggest quality standards in regards to software development. So I started to believe that quality assurance was all about defining process, specifying activities, and no matter what you do, if they are clear, people will follow. Needless to say, I was wrong. But what made me realize that I was wrong were two main things. First of all, most of the organizations, I'll try to go on the right side and point out, use a hierarchical structure. And within that structure, we want to go up as high as possible. Why? Because of the money. The higher you are, the better you get paid. So what actually happens is if you're good with a shovel, then you'll get some sort of mechanical device, an excavator, and at the end you'll drive the big bad one and get a lot of pay for it. But what actually happens is that you will be promoted until you become incompetent. It sounds a little bit stupid, right? But the fact is that you will always be promoted, not because you'll do a good job at the promoted job, but because you are good at the previous job before it. So you might end up in a place where you are truly incompetent. You cannot do the job. This is called the Peter principle. And it made such an impression on me that now I have Peter wherever I go. The next one was the Dunning-Kruger effect. Do you know about it? So some of you do. So what it says is that there is an inability of the unskilled to recognize their ineptitude. How do you translate this into common sense? So if you'd have one axis with knowing and being an expert and one with confidence from 0 to 100%, where do you think the confidence level would be for a person that knows almost nothing? It's actually the highest. And for a person that is an expert, it never reaches the same level. Why? Because you become aware of everything that can go wrong. And you're never 100% confident, but you manage to do a good job with it. So these two principles made quite an impression on me, and I started to ask myself, what do I know about software testing? It's a tough question. Have you ever asked yourselves? No? Perhaps you'll do after this talk. So I went in search of an answer, and I started to do what I do when I need to understand things. I started to make a drawing. This is actually the first version of the map. It was on a piece of paper that got lost in the end. Afterwards, I did a diagram to make it look nicer. And then I thought to myself, why not a map? And I made this ugly thing. But let's talk a little bit about maps. And let's go back to 1855 in London to meet this guy, Jon Snow. It's not the Jon Snow from... So during that time, one of the biggest issues was cholera. There were all sorts of pandemics. And what he did, when such an epidemic broke in the Soho district, he drew one black square for each death. So this is the place where the most deaths occurred. Can you think what was in front of this building? Exactly, it was a water well. So without having any idea about germs, microbes, and just using a map, he managed to identify what was the cause of the cholera. Kind of tricky, right? It was hard for him because almost nobody believed him. So a map will always help you to unlock meaning. And I have one last story, but for this one we have to go really, really back in time. 70,000 years BC, somewhere in the south of France, in a region called La Croix. Have you heard of it? There are some of the oldest cave paintings. But what this lady did was realize that the cave paintings were not actually for animals, but they were actually maps of the stars. So what those ancient people did was, instead of using a map, they used what they knew, an animal, and drew the sky, so that they can relate to it. It sounds interesting, right? What started out on a piece of paper definitely had to be a map. But the first version of the map was really ugly, so I did this one. It was a much fancier, a lot of colors, a lot of things in it. So what I did next, if you can see this one, it's kind of small. This is what I drew with what I knew about software testing. You'll see the huge difference between then and now. So what I did was went and searched for more information, and I built what is called the Google custom search engine. If you search anything about testing in Google, at least 50% it's commercial advertising. It's really difficult to find good stuff. When you build a custom search engine, you just say which websites to look into. So I searched for software testing blogs, found around 300 of them, and then put them in the custom search engine so that I would be able to search certain topics. Then I needed a way to validate the map area. So I built this software testing blogs where I read around 3,000 blog posts and see if they can be mapped and put on the testing map. Then I would know that it's complete. It took a lot of time, and from this small thing, it gradually grew and grew and grew until it became what it is today. I'm still working on it. Afterwards, we'll take a quick tour of the main topics so that you see what I'm referring to. But one of the important things is what it actually meant for me. So I had to learn how to draw a little bit in Corel. I learned how to host a domain and solve problems. I had to learn some PHP, although many of the things that I do it by copy-pasting. I learned that there are a lot of testers in the world and that I'm not alone. I don't know if you realize this, but there are a lot of testers out there. What I started with 300 blogs, now it's somewhere around 500 blogs. 500. And I invested a lot of time. But what was the most challenging things was that I sometimes went a little bit crazy. Why? Because I was dealing with things that I did not know before. I had no idea how to host a domain. Nobody can explain to you, do this, 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 and this. Everybody gives you a hosting and you have to know what to do. So there are a lot of moments when I wanted to quit, but what I learned the most is how to deal with the unknown. In the end, I realized that this is one of the most important things that we have to do as a tester. Learn how to work with the unknown. Nobody gives you whatever you need. You have to search for it. You have to look for it. And it takes patience. And if you go crazy, it's not good for anybody, especially for your teammates. But the biggest gain was that I actually learned things about software testing. It was one of the most useful methods to learn about it. No matter what I read before, once I started to do things, everything changed. It was like an epiphany. I started to see things clearer, and I started to work also on different aspects of software testing. So, any questions so far? No? We'll wait till the end then. So let's take a quick tour of the main areas. First, let's start with learning resources and social. Whatever you want to know about testing, you'll find it on the internet. You just need to search for it. For instance, I found the heuristic table of testing from TestingStage. Doesn't it look like the periodic table of elements? You can find all sorts of things. This is the one that I like the most. 99 things you can do to become a better tester for Ministry of Testing. Have you seen it? Yes. It's wonderful. From time to time, if you have a look over it, it really changes your perspective about things. And also, I learned about the social stuff. Tabra de Testare is one of the testing communities in Romania. It's spread around 4 cities. And it made me join them. It was the first place where I talked about the testing map. It's extremely important to learn on your own, but also to come to conferences and gatherings where you can ask for feedback or give feedback. Because if you learn on your own, you start to have a pretty awesome idea about yourself. You believe that you know a lot of stuff, but you don't get a lot of feedback. So, next on the area is about processes. Why do we need to know things about processes? Because in many situations, testing is at the end. So you need to understand what happens before and why it happens. You need to know how things work within your company. So what I did here was create my own version of Lego Scrum. Have you heard of Lego Scrum? Have you tried it? It's a wonderful way to exercise Scrum, to see if you really have learned and understood the principles behind it, not just doing mechanical stuff. Next on the map, it's the support activities. You need to know about the quality management system, about project planning, risks, configuration management, about change management. What I started to do here was a sketch note that contains around 50 or so measures that you can do in software development. So, as I mentioned before, I did not only put things on a map, I started to do something else with it. Next is about tools. Have you heard of Andy Glover, the cartoon tester? No. If you haven't, just look him up. He does some wonderful drawings like this one, the greatest testing tools available to the tester. And he talks about the ears, the mouth, the hand, the gut, the feet, the heart. I skipped one, but you'll see why. The nose. It's wonderful. Next, about testing principles. It's extremely important to know the things that you have to do, to know about the pesticide paradox, to know that you cannot fix all bugs. So what I did here was try to imagine how bugs look like. And I actually built a couple of them to see how I can search better for them. Just to get an idea about how big they are, this is me along with the bugs. Tomorrow, I'll have a workshop about requirements, and I'll talk about the camouflaged one, the one that sits on my shoulder. It's the testability bug. For me, it was like a, I don't know if I can say it revelation, but it was one of the greatest and biggest findings to learn about testability. You know, we test a lot, but we don't look at the things that we need in order to do a good job. Next, about soft skills. I guess by now everybody knows that you need to have soft skills in order to deal with people. But one of my biggest questions was, what does it take for a person to become part of a team, and what does it take a group of people to become a team? So now I'm working on this. It's called Managing Teams.brain4it.com, where I try to gather a lot of the articles that I read about information about teams and how to work inside teams. Next is an area about technology. Of course, we work with technology. We need to know about it. Evgeny, how am I doing on time? I'm good? Okay. 20 minutes, perfect. Then about history. On the history side, I only put a link to this website. It's called testingreferences.com. It's one of the biggest classified history items about the testing in general. If you have time, just look it up. It tells you when magazines have started, when some of the testing approaches have started to be defined. There are a lot of information there, and This is, I don't know if you can see it better, just a listing, but they also have a big, huge diagram, very nice one. Next is the methodology part, where I talk about the testing techniques and the approaches. Do you see the difference between a technique and an approach? So for me, the way I see it, I'm not saying it's the right way. A technique is something simple, like domain testing, decision table, boundary value analysis, and the approach is the way you use it. Either you do something like scripted testing or exploratory testing. How do you take that technique and put it into practice? It took a lot of time for me to realize this difference, but it became extremely important because the question now evolved around how can I use this technique? Does this technique apply in my context? Can I use it now? What should I do with it? So what I did here, first of all, was work on, let's say, static testing techniques, how to review requirements. This is the sketch note that I built. The workshop that I'll do tomorrow will be based on this sketch note. And it will be quite fun to work with it. You know, it's a big question, and it took me a lot of time to find an answer. Because it's difficult to state what you actually do to understand the requirements. But it's one of the, let's say, biggest missions that we have to do. So what I did was search a lot on the web, printed something like this big, full of papers, and started to read it. And after 3 or 4 months, I came up with the sketch note. Actual practical things that you can do to better know and understand requirements. And I built another thing. It's called testingchallenges.thetestingmap.org. If the testing map is more about knowledge, the challenges are more about practice. Has anyone tried them? How was it? Okay, so what the challenges are is like simple testing exercises. You have to do something. For instance, how many checks do you think you can do to a text field in a web page? Anybody can take a guess? 15? Just 15? What I managed to do is identify that there are around 21 checks that you can do on a single text field. Doesn't it sound challenging? When I started to build it, I thought there were like 8 or 10. But actually, I got more and more feedback, people pointing things out. For instance, one of the, let's say, stupidest checks that you have to do is just click Control A and select everything. See if there is a text somewhere that is actually displayed with a white font and not visible on the page. It sounds extremely simple, but in many situations we don't do it because we forget about it. So what the testing challenges do, they focused on simple things. For instance, the last one that I built was about boundary value analysis. Do you have any idea how many boundaries there are, invalid ones, for a time and date field? I'll spare you the thinking. I found 18 invalid boundaries. Why there are so many? Because we think of time as a running line, but no 2 months have the same number of dates. There are a couple of times in the year where you either don't have an hour or have twice the same hour when you change from daylight saving to summertime. There are things that you actually know, but it's difficult to explain them. And I built something else. I built these black boxes in order to, let's say, test or challenge the way you do exploratory testing. You just have to figure out how they work and what they do. It sounds very simple, but actually it's quite difficult. Good. Have I bored you so far? No? So what can you do with the map? First of all, you can choose one area and present it as you are teaching. Present it to yourself. Just give yourself the information that you know about that area. It sounds extremely simple, but it's one of the best techniques that you can use to learn about something, because you realize what you know and what you need to know, what you need to learn afterwards. One other simple exercise is just take some of the areas, print them as cards, draw a card, and do a talk about it. You can do this within your team. Sharing knowledge within the team is one of the best things that you can do as a tester. It helps you not only to gather knowledge from other people, but to find the ways and means to express yourselves. Because, you know, when we talk about testing, we talk about skills and knowledge. You cannot have a skill just because you want to. You cannot be better at talking, you cannot be persuasive just because you want to. You need to practice, you need to do some exercises. And most important, you need to get some feedback from your peers. It's extremely important to get feedback because feedback gives you the other side of the perspective. You see what people see in you, what people understand from what you are saying. One other fun thing to do is to make a puzzle out of it. Nowadays it's quite easy to go to, I know how they are called in English, to a souvenir shop and just give them the print. By the way, the map, you can go to the website, right-click, save as, and save it on your desktop on high resolution and do whatever you want with it. And you can try to make the puzzle and time yourself how much it takes for you to make the puzzle. It will be quite interesting because you'll see the connections between certain areas. You can use it to build your own mnemonic. This is what I did when I worked at Capgemini. I tried to identify the areas that are most commonly used or the techniques that I have to use within my context. And it was quite easy when I had a big print of the map to see what I use and where I use it. And I built this. One other important thing that you can do, you can show it to your peers and especially managers. I found out that it's extremely interesting to see a manager's face or someone hiring the company when you show them the map and say, look, this is what I need to learn to be a good tester. They just stare and wait. And after a couple of minutes, they start to ask questions. But why do you need to know this? How does this help you? How can you learn about this? And people start to realize what you need to know as a tester. You know, it's sometimes also our fault as testers because developers or people in the company or managers see testing as a simple thing to do that anybody can do. It's our fault because we don't explain it well enough and we don't show them what it actually takes to be a good tester. Everybody can be a tester just like everybody can be a driver. It doesn't mean that you will be good just because you want to. It takes time, perseverance, learning, understanding. Just give it a go. Show it to your managers. The simplest thing that you can do with the map is to explore it. Take just 10 minutes, 15, 20, how much you have to spare, and just look around it. Just have a go at it. It doesn't take a lot. But the biggest thing that you can do, come on, is to be inspired to build your own. Try to build your own map. Try to see what you know about testing, how you understand it, how areas relate to one another. It will give you a better perspective. Imagine that sometimes you see testing as a big black hole, right? You need to know so much, you need to learn a lot of stuff, but nobody can point out exactly what you need to know. You need to do it for yourself. And building a map is one of the easiest ways to do it. Even if you're not good at drawing, start small. Do it on a piece of paper. Try it on Visio or other things. You can also build a map in Excel if you want to. But what I did in this presentation was try to give you the sense of building your own map. Build your own knowledge about software testing. It will help you a lot. You know, just coming to a conference is not enough to learn. Here you get the exchange of ideas, you see other perspectives, you get the opportunity to ask questions, to get feedback. But in the end, learning can be done only by yourself. Nobody can teach you anything. It can just show you a door, and it's up to you to decide if you want to walk through it or not. I know it's easier to come to a conference than ask yourself, what do I know or what do I need to know? It's the toughest questions ever. What do I know and what do I need to know? It's just easy to stand on a chair and hear somebody talking. It's most difficult to talk to yourself. Am I right? Yeah, so hopefully I got inspired. I got you inspired to build your own maps. And hopefully I will see you tomorrow at the How to Review Requirements workshop. It will be a lot of fun. Now, thank you. And if you have any questions, the most difficult areas, the thing that I got, let's say, understand really late was this difference between techniques and approaches. Because if you start to see them differently, you can focus, as I said, on techniques and how to use them. This is why I started to build also the testing challenges, because those are situations where you have to use techniques, and that's it. It doesn't matter what approach you have to use techniques. And you know, it's quite simple. If you're a driver, you have to have certain techniques. You need how to change the gears, how to turn the lights on, how to turn the lights off. Knowing the testing techniques, it's essential for testers. And it's not that many. It's quite a few of them. The difficult thing is knowing when to apply them.
Where we can find a full version of your testing map?
You just go to the testingmap.org and there you can download it. Just
testingmap.org.
Okay. Yes.
Thank you.
If there are no more questions, we have one and one over here. We have time, right?
Yeah. First this and then this one.
I've got two questions. First is, can someone collaborate in your testing map or present his ideas to you? And the second is maybe some kind of tricky question. You mentioned that in whole map you got only several areas in which you have practice every day. So is there some effort to practice other areas in your work if you don't have any everyday practice activities in these areas?
So to answer the first one, if you feel like you can contribute to something, just drop me an email. If you go on the website, you'll see also a link there. It says team. There are a lot of people that have contributed and helped me to define the map. And to answer your second question, nothing can replace practice and experience. But what you can do is try to see what other people have done or learned within that area. For instance, I have not done a lot of mobile testing. But what I do is read articles about it and get some idea or some sense of it. I believe that's the only thing that you can do, or you can start to practice on your own. Like, for instance, the application that we have here for TestingStage. Try to test that one.
I think you will find a lot of bugs.
Okay, thank you for the talk. It was very great. So the question is, at the very beginning, you told that you start searching on some testing blogs. So as I understand, it's mostly English-speaking blogs.
Yes.
So if we have some, for example, Russian-speaking something, can it be included into the map?
It can be included, but the translation using Google Translate from Russian to English.
Oh, yeah, that's bad.
It's really bad. I'm saying this because I've tried it. I did not mention this is my second time I'm here in Kiev. I was also last year. And I tried to read some of the blogs. Some of the things are understandable. Others, you don't really get it, what the people are talking about.
Okay.
And you know, I'm glad that you asked this, because this is a big question. In the whole world, if you look about it, you'll see very little, let's say, blogs from Romania, from Ukraine, from Bulgaria, from Russia, because this is actually a barrier. Yeah. You have to start to do it in English, because English is what everybody understands. And from what I know, Ukraine, Romania, Poland, Bulgaria are the cores of the, let's say, IT development in Europe. But you seldom find blogs or people from this country. Why? Because of this, let's say, language barrier.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So guys, I guess we're out of time. Thank you very much, and hopefully...
We have a time for the last question, if you don't mind.
I don't mind.
Okay.
One last question.
Any volunteers to ask last question? No. Okay. So okay.
Now
We got even two. Okay. So we try to answer both, but very quickly.
My question is, how can I define the main valuable test for the feature, for the product, using your map? How can I quickly define the main valuable test?
So that's a tough question. But first of all, what I believe you should know is what techniques you can use. So you can start in the upper left corner, see what techniques are there, how you can apply them, and then look at the approaches on the down left corner. See how you can use those techniques within your context. It's not a well-defined recipe because your question is quite difficult. Okay, and the last one?
The last one, yes.
I guess my question is even more difficult. Have you researched testing costs and like testing economy, testing effectiveness, about spending like very focused test efforts?
So I'm glad you talked about effectiveness, but there are two terms, being efficient and being effective. It's quite a difference. It's doing the right thing and doing the thing right. Before focusing on efficiency, focus on doing the right thing. If you know what you do, then you can make it more efficient. If you don't know what you do, then you just blather around and won't be able to do it. That's why I'm saying the focus should always be on techniques and approaches. If you know what techniques to use when, if you define your approach, then you will be able to be more efficient. And it's very difficult for someone from the outside to come and tell you, look, if you do this, you'll be more efficient. It's all about the context. Your context is the thing that you know best, not somebody from the outside. And there is no clear recipe to become more efficient than always asking yourself, what can I do better? And also asking your peers or your managers. I don't think anybody has a barrier in asking for feedback.
Okay, great. So Claudio, thank you so much.
Thank you.